I'm Dan Wootton. No spin, no bias, no censorship. This is Outspoken episode number 211. And happy St. George's Day. For me, this picture sums up my pride in England. Isn't it great? That's what I love to see. And the man who sums up hating our country and driving division at almost any cost, well, I hate to say it, but it's our Prime Minister, Slippery Starmer.
The day after the terrible Southport incident last year, I went up the next day to take the opportunity to shake the hands of the first responders. These were the police and the ambulance workers who had gone to the scene. By the time I got back to London that very day, we had people with these flags throwing bricks at the very same police officers that I'd been shaking the hands of.
Yeah, I'm not joking, folks. He genuinely used his St. George's Day event at Downing Street, attended by Gary Lineker, for God's sake, to drive more division over the so-called riots after the Southport massacre. The scumbag even bigged up his own brief visit to Southport, where, remember, he was heckled. Let me tell you, Peter Lynch loved England far more than Keir Starmer ever will. But breaking right now, a bombshell leaked recording of future Conservative leader Robert Jenrick revealing plans for a coalition with Reform UK has sent British politics into meltdown today.
And so one way or another, I'm determined to do that and to bring this coalition together and make sure that we win.
I'll reveal the surprising reactions in my digest next, and then Father Calvin Robinson weighs in. Also coming up on the show today, Lady Victoria Starmer comes out of hiding hours after I revealed growing problems in Two Tier Keir's marriage. LBC's James O'Brien and Ian Dale call for a cover-up of statistics showing the ethnicity of criminals in the latest MSM outrage. And Gary Lineker humiliated as he stands by pro-Hamas propaganda from the British Bashing Corporation in a car crash. New interview, I'll show you. Then, in the Uncancelled Aftershow on Substack, two YouTube sensations join me for the first time. George the Giant Slayer from across the Atlantic and British war hero Trevor Coult MC. They're going to be two fascinating conversations that you can sign up and watch right now through my Substack, www.outspoken.live. Remember, we're also going to be revealing today's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass before the end of the show. You can vote for the Union Jackass right now if you're watching live on YouTube in our live chat. The three nominees as chosen by you. Gary Lineker, nominated by Dr. Wolf, because he's a socialist, so far left, he may as well be on the hard shoulder. He describes politicians as Nazis and continually pushes his warped views, including laughably claiming to be a victim of racism. Why doesn't he do what he is just paid to do? Commentate on football. Thankfully, this season is his last one. Time to flap off jug ears. Love that, Dr. Wolf. Thank you. James O'Brien, nominated because he has no issues seemingly with biologically born males entering female changing rooms, and nominated by Darren Donaldson, Nadia Whitcomb MP, because she is out of touch regarding the risks women face with this dangerous woke ideology. And actually, I'm going to be playing some of what Nadia Whitcomb said in Parliament later in the show and showing you J.K. Rowling's incredible response. So we've got lots going on today. Let's go. Is a coalition between a surging Reform UK led by Nigel Farage and a Conservative Party attempting to outflank them on the right under a future Robert Jenrick leadership a matter of if and not when. A bombshell leaked recording of the high-performing Shadow Justice Secretary, who, remember, was just narrowly defeated by Kemi Badenoch to replace Rishi Sunak, speaking to the UCL Conservative Association dinner in late March, has sent British politics into meltdown today. Listen.
Head towards a general election where the nightmare scenario is that Keir Starmer sails in through the middle as a result of the two parties being disunited. I don't know about you, but I'm not prepared for that to happen. I want the right to be united. And so one way or another, I'm determined to do that. And to bring this coalition together and make sure that we win.
Now, I've got so much to say about this leak, by the way. Firstly, you know I always look into why something has happened. So that leak was to Sly News, and it dominated PMQs today. Why did Sly News decide to run that exclusive today, even though the dinner took place back in March? I think it's because they're trying to help slippery Starmer out, which is disgusting. But we know that's how the mainstream media operates. The leak did prompt this response, though, from Reform UK Deputy Leader Richard Tice.
Well, look, competition's a good thing, and the Tories have had their chance. They had 14 years to turn the country around and make it grow again and great again, and they did the opposite. And so people won't forgive and they won't forget. That's why we're surging in the polls. That's why we are in almost every poll now ahead of the Tories, very often by more than the margin of error.
Now, intriguingly, Nigel Farage has not yet commented on Jenrick's words, although the man himself has tried to play them down as he skipped PMQs, where the Prime Minister, slippery Starmer, used the leak, the conveniently timed leak from Sly News, to try and cut down Kemi Badenoch, who, by the way, had humiliated the dude on the issue of what is a woman.
The mask has slipped just 1 week before the elections because the Shadow Justice Secretary is not here. A man who's doing everything he can to replace her. The man that most of them want as leader of their party has admitted that Reform and the Tories are working together. He said, I want this fight to be united. He said, he's determined to bring this coalition, he calls it, together one way or another. Well, I think we know what that means.
Now, no matter how hard Kemi tried to pin that lying woman hater to the floor on the most important issue of the day, Starmer kept diverting to the Jenrick leak.
He talks about political footballs, but a coalition between Reform and the Tories being formed behind her back. We know what that means when the Shadow Justice Secretary and the member for Clacton cook up their joint manifesto. NHS charging a pro-Russia foreign policy, enter workers' rights. Just as the Love government lost control of the economy, the borders and health, in 6 short months, she's lost control of her party.
Mr. Speaker, he's clearly so uncomfortable talking about this subject, yes.
And he is. He doesn't want to talk about what a woman is because he doesn't know what a woman is. So finally, that prompted Kemi to hit a home run by saying what we've all known for some time about slippery Starmer. Our scumbag Prime Minister has no balls.
About doing the right thing, even when it is difficult. And the truth is, he doesn't have the balls. The Prime Minister only tells people what they want to hear. He only tells people what they want to hear. He is a weather vane who twists in the wind. He cheered an ideology that denied safe spaces to women and girls because he thought it was cool to do so. He hounded a brave female MP out of his party for telling the truth he accepts now. And now he is hiding behind the Supreme Court judgment. And isn't that because he doesn't know what he actually believes?
I can only assume that sounded better when she did it in the mirror earlier on. But the truth is, it doesn't really matter what the Leader of the Opposition says because nobody believes, none of them, that she's going to lead them into the next election anyway. It's going to be the Shadow Justice Secretary. He's away plotting, that's why he's not here today, Mr. Speaker. And the member for Clacton fighting over the bones of the Tory party. And they think Reform are going to give them their votes without changing their policy. Absolutely no way. The member for Clacton's going to do what he always does, eat the Tory party for breakfast.
Now, Farage actually posted afterwards, the Prime Minister says, I will eat the Tory party for breakfast. He's right, but I'm having Labour for lunch too. He then tried to mock the Prime Minister pretending to be patriotic this St. George's Day.
Happy St. George's Day to everybody. Let's celebrate Englishness. Now, I've been doing this all of my life. Reform UK. We have members who are happy to be Welsh, Scottish, but unashamed too to be English. And how hilarious that the Prime Minister chooses to put a flag of St. George outside Downing Street. They're dancing to our tune. We all know that Labour can't stand the very thought of Englishness. We remember the Emily Thornberry scornful tweet about the English flag. But hey, please go out and celebrate. Maybe with a pint, because that's what I'm going to do.
Labour hates England. And Starmer particularly hates England. Nothing could actually sum that up more than his dogged obsession with linking our National Day to the so-called riots after the Southport massacre. First, he did so in an interview with the Sun newspaper that, remember, endorsed this absolute fool for Prime Minister, but now appears to be having buyer's remorse.
There is this battle for the flag. There are some people who want to use it, cause conflict, to use it as it was used in some of the riots last year. I don't think we should give up on our flag. We should reclaim it. It belongs not to me as Prime Minister, not to the government, not to the Labour Party, not to any political party. It belongs to all of us, and we should be proud of it.
But then, the complete hypocrite, and I'm still so angry about this, actually decided to politicise St. George's Day in regards to Southport, the Southport massacre, his visit to Southport, in the most twisted narrative at last night's Downing Street event, which, by the way, was attended by so-called patriots like, Gary Lineker.
The day after the terrible Southport incident last year, I went up the next day to take the opportunity to shake the hands of the first responders. These were the police and the ambulance workers who had gone to the scene. By the time I got back to London that very day, we had people with these flags throwing bricks at the very same police officers that I'd been shaking the hands of.
Now, Starmer is the very definition of a divisive politician, because let me be clear, he is lying about Southport, lying. That shameless charlatan spent about a minute with the people. I remember it very clearly. I covered it on the day. Do you remember? He went to lay the flowers. He didn't look at anyone because he was immediately heckled, not by the so-called far right, but by family members and friends of the victims who were absolutely horrified by the cover-up surrounding Axel Rudikabana, which we all knew was already happening. And rather than speak to those good people, the members of the British public who were absolutely horrified by the terror attack which saw those 3 young girls brutally murdered, he scarpered. And you know what he scarpered to return to do? To go and party at Downing Street. So let me repeat. Keir Starmer hates England. And this might be controversial for some people, but I mean it. Lucy Connolly is, and Peter Lynch was, far more patriotic for England than Slippery Starmer will ever be. Because let me tell you, we know Starmer picks and chooses which types of violence, which incidents of civil disobedience he chooses to be outraged about. Because he didn't give a damn all weekend about the very obvious incitement to violence against women like J.K. Rowling by the trans mob. and he certainly doesn't give a damn about the black on black carnage on the streets of London on a daily basis. As our friend here at Outspoken based in Bougie posted facetiously, Edgware Road. A beautiful display of multiculturalism and diversity took place in central London during Easter Sunday. Diversity truly is our strength. Let me play you the video that Based and Bougie was referring to.
Oh, shit! Oh, no, he's going to run him over. Not... Wait! What the fuck?
Oh, shit. No. Buddy's out of his mind. No! I know! Hey, buddy got hands for real. Hey, he looked the fuck up, bro. He fucked up, bro.
So that's what's happened on the streets of Sadiq Khan's London. The streets of slippery Starmer's England. But he never talks about that. He never talks about that. On St. George's Day, he wanted to talk about the so-called riots after the Southport massacre because he has an agenda. And he has an agenda to paint true patriots as far right. And that's why I want to see the common sense of Rupert Lowe introduced to any future right-wing coalition, because I want to show you what Rupert Lowe had to say about all of this today. Labour, Tory, Reform. On illegal migrants, the minor squabbling point of difference between them is simply where to house the criminals. Not here or there, not in that hotel, over there instead. Stop bickering and just sodding deport the lot. Not just some, all. To respond now, let me bring in Father Calvin Robinson. Okay, Father Calvin, a lot to go at this St. George's Day, but can we start with Slippery Starmer? Because, as you can probably tell, I am genuinely so angry that he decided to turn his address about St. George's Day, when he claims that he's trying to unite the country, into Southport, the Southport massacre, what happened in those hours after it, talking about his visit, misleading the public about his visit, and genuinely trying to sow division, which is all this guy seems to want to do.
Yeah, it's especially frustrating because we still don't have all the information about the Southport killings or the Southport killer.
No.
And it's been drip fed to us in a very controlled way since the beginning. So for him to use that for political capital is quite rightly disgusting, actually. But you're right, it's this faux patriotism that we're seeing from our politicians today. I saw the same thing from Rishi Sunak on Twitter. It's like, I'm English. Like, you're kind of Indian Punjabi, but it's nice that you want to celebrate St. George's Day along with the rest of us. It's like they want to appear like they care about these things, but they don't really know how, because they don't really care. It's always an image, it's always a front. Whether it's Keir Starmer or Rishi Sunak, it doesn't really matter. This is why we need some politicians who are ordinary British people who genuinely get the same concerns that the rest of us have, who are worried about the same things that the rest of us are, rather than these career politicians that are just in it to be part of the club. We see through them now.
We see through them. We absolutely see through them, but the mainstream media doesn't. And I'm just disgusted. I'm actually genuinely disgusted that's his idea of patriotism. That's his idea of bringing the English together. And it's like, do you think we're stupid? We know you lied to us about Axel Rudakabana. We know the reason you couldn't face those people at Southport is because you knew at that point that Axel Rudakabana was a Islamist terrorist who had an Al-Qaeda training manual in his bedroom. I just think he's disgusting. Starmer,
Well, they think we have short-term memories as well, as you quite rightly pointed out. We all saw the footage of when he went down there. Now, that was clearly a political move to cash in on the moment and show how compassionate he is. But it backfired instantly, and the public around him weren't happy. The people online weren't happy. Nobody was happy with his approach. And so he disappeared quickly and forgot about it until today. Now he wants to use that as some kind of signal to show how empathetic he was. Like, we all remember, that was not that long ago. We all remember his response and how cowardly he was. And not to forget the fact that he came out to speak and blame everyone else except for Axel. Blame people who are protesting, blame people who are upset, blame them, call them far right. Like, we are the problem rather than the chap who's going around stabbing young British girls.
I know. And also, Father Calvin, let's just pretend that he hadn't converted to Islam. Let's just pretend that he didn't have an Al-Qaeda manual. I mean, honestly, this regime is about information control. It is so, so disturbing. Then, Father Calvin, we saw, and you know, in my digest, I put my theory that Sly News purposefully leaked this tape today of Robert Jenrick to provide Keir Starmer with political cover in PMQs. But let's just put that to one side, okay? What do you make of Jenrick suggesting a coalition between Reform UK and the Conservative Party before the next election?
Possible option for him, really, because they're both fighting over the centre ground and they can't both have it. There will be a split vote unless they come to some kind of agreement. They need a coalition at this point. But the problem is neither of them are looking at the right of British politics. They're all looking at the centre. And so if they argue over the centrist dads, good for them. Whichever one of them manages to get the most votes, great, but they're still going to be in a minority because a large number of the British public are conservative, are right-wing, and nobody's courting us anymore. It seems to me that Reform seems to have figured that that's their core base, so they can go off to the centre, they'll fine. The Conservatives gave up on the right 20 years ago, and so nobody's bothered about ordinary right-wing, ordinary conservative British people. So they can form a coalition, but it's not going to make much difference unless they address the elephant in the room.
Breaking right now, Lady Victoria Starmer has re-emerged in public after weeks missing as Slippery Starmer's marriage woes over the shape of his secret family grow. Now, she didn't look happy about it at all last night, if you look at the picture of her with Starmer. And some people are saying to me today, oh, Dan, you know, she's back. Nothing was going on. Don't be so silly. Oh, no. I predicted on yesterday's show this is exactly what would happen. Watch. So I know what will happen now. Just honestly, just wait. Just like before the last election when this was all going viral, Starmer will force Lady V to play happy families while continuing to hide the truth. It's a lot like clockwork. She was dragged to last night's St. George's event at Downing Street. But the historically unpopular PM's increasingly bizarre handling of his personal life alongside his U-turn on the trans issue has prompted Mike Graham on Talk TV to declare he's not a man at all.
Right. We've now got a Prime Minister who's done a full 360. Yeah. Today he said a woman is a biological woman, whereas 3 years ago he said trans women are women.
And he wasn't sure. Yeah, and he said at one point, you know, I believe that trans rights are human rights. And he repeated it, and he said it over and over again.
Does he not think that we're going to remember that?
Well, I don't understand why he thinks he can just U-turn on absolutely everything and make out that he still believes it now as much as he did before. Because you can't believe in both. You can't have just changed your mind on everything.
No. Which goes to prove exactly what he is.
I don't think he's a man. How about
Don't you?
Yeah, Keir Starmer is not a man.
Has he got a cervix?
No, I think he doesn't have the instincts of a man, he doesn't have the leadership skills of a man, and I think he doesn't have the kind of cojones of a man.
Yeah, well, I totally agree. with Mike
I
Graham.
love Mike Graham.
on
He's
that.
hilarious.
Yeah, totally. He's not a man. He's pathetic. How can you be a man if you don't even know that it's impossible for a woman to have a penis? But Father Calvin, can I talk first? Because you know this is something that I've been on for a very long time. The secret shape of Starmer's family, these marriage troubles between Lady Victoria, and any time there starts to be a lot of attention about the fact that she's disappeared, about the fact that she's refusing to be by his side. And we had yesterday Jim Davidson have to come out publicly and say all of these rumors about the fact that I have a CCTV video of Lord Ali and Keir Starmer in some type of embrace are untrue, and that's a deep fake. And I totally believe that's a deep fake, by the way, but it doesn't change the fundamental question that the mainstream media, for some reason, was so prepared to talk about every single detail of Boris Johnson's personal life. Do you remember the Sun newspaper used to splash on the fact that Carrie Johnson and Boris Johnson would have had a few fights over the course of a week? But there is total radio silence about what is really going on in Starmer's marriage.
It's interesting, isn't it? Firstly, I hope that their marriage is fine. I hope that they are happily married and are loving and looking after their children. I hope that's the case. It doesn't seem to be the case. From the early interviews I've seen with his family, it seems that they don't really have a high regard for him, which is quite concerning. But I struggle to imagine that Sir Keir Starmer has another family. To have two, when I struggle to see him having one, is difficult. But you're right in that the media have had a two-tiered approach. Carrie Symonds, before she was Carrie Johnson, had the microscope over her, and after the marriage, she's continued to have a microscope over her every single move. Now, it may be because Carrie is more political than Lady Victoria. It may be the case, or it may just be that the media really likes Keir Starmer and wants him to succeed, and so hides the personal stuff, whereas they didn't like Boris Johnson and didn't want him to succeed, so they really focused in on his personal stuff.
I mean, you have to feel sorry for Lady Victoria Starmer in a lot of ways, Father Calvin. I mean, when you look at her, and I've got this other shot of her actually from last night, the pressure is clearly taking its toll.
Oh, yeah.
It's very, very difficult what she is currently going through. But my point on this is that every single time I run a poll with the Outspoken audience, about 95% of respondents say the public has a right to know about the Prime Minister's personal life, about the true shape of the Prime Minister's family. And I would also say, Father Calvin, he seems to pick and choose when he wants to deploy his family. So I'll give you two examples. Do you remember that whole ridiculous debate about Netflix and the series Adolescence the other day, which was just a piece of anti-white propaganda, to be honest? Starmer mentioned multiple occasions the fact that he had watched this series with his son and his daughter, and he spoke about their age. And likewise, when he was in the deep doo-doo over all of the freebies being provided by Lord Ali, and the fact that he was staying in this penthouse apartment in Mayfair, which Paul Staines, the editor of Guido Fawkes, has said here on Outspoken he believes was probably something to do with the troubles in the marriage, Starmer threw his son under the bus and said, oh, no, we had to be there because my son was studying for his GCSEs. So it feels like he will only protect his family when he wants to, and if it's politically convenient for him, he's more than happy to deploy them.
Yeah, that's quite sad, isn't it? Because it shows that he puts his career first over his family. A man should put his family first over his career, actually. And I haven't seen that from him, which probably goes to show why his kids don't hold him in high regard, because they come second to him. And the kids feel that. You can always tell that in a family. It is a great shame. He needs to focus on the wife and children. And if he can't do that as well as become Prime Minister, maybe he should step down. Maybe we'll all be better off for that. But the fact that it's also hush-hush is a bit weird, because you're right in that we've come to a point now where, I mean, I would say it's probably not in the public interest in general for us to know what's the private lives of our politicians, but it's too late for that. The genie's out of the bottle. We do know the private lives of our politicians now. So to have one in particular who's keeping it so secretive tells us that something is going on that they don't want us to know, and therefore people are going to want to know even more. So the media has a job, really, to hold the Prime Minister to account and to let the public know what he's trying to hide.
Well, I just think our mainstream media are completely shameless, Father Calvin, totally shameless on this. I mean, I just want to remind you, actually, some of you will have seen this, but the interview was a few months ago. But Paul Staines, really good guy. He's stepped back from Guido Fawkes now, unfortunately. But this was when he was happy to reveal on this show that actually he knew that there are journalists who even have a birth certificate relating to this story. Watch.
We've both been in the game a long time. You know the rules. If you can't stand it up completely, you can't run the story. So we have a name, as do the Mail and the Telegraph. We have a birth certificate, and people have been looking into it. People have been journalists have contacted the family. So it's in play, and a lot of people do know it, but we have not been able to substantiate it to the degree that you need to publish.
Okay, so to clarify, would you say that this story is about the shape of Keir Starmer's family?
Yes. Yeah, that's a very good way of phrasing it.
But you know, Father Calvin, Guido Fawkes has just been taken to the cleaners by Dale Vince in a really despicable piece of lawfare, which I won't go into here, but you can read all about it online. And I feel like, where's the Daily Mail on this story? Where's the Daily Telegraph? Where's the Sun newspaper?
Interesting. Well, we used to have left-wing press and right-wing press, but since COVID, we've pretty much just had government
all
press.
left-wing. They all just want to curry favour with power, don't they? They took all of that money over COVID, Calvin. Remember that? All of that advertising money. And now they're so terrified about regulation. I mean, you've even seen it, Calvin, with our former employer, GB News, which is like slavishly devoted to giving very soft coverage to Keir Starmer via its political editor, Christopher Hope, on a daily basis.
I remember the head producer of GB News storming into where I was working to say, "Did you say XYZ about the Prime Minister?" Like, yes, I did, and I believe it to be true. But we had number 10 on the phone, and like, we're not subservient to number 10. Our job is to hold them to account. But that's the attitude of the mainstream media now, isn't it? Unfortunately, you're absolutely right. And yeah, we saw over COVID, they took the bungs of cash, as Boris Johnson called it. But not just over COVID. We've seen this since as well, over the riots that we were just talking about, the Southport, after the Southport massacre. We saw the front pages of all the headlines across the left-wing and so-called centre-right newspapers, the same headlines. So they're all in cahoots as an arm of the government now, unfortunately. So there is no free press other than the independent press.
Now, Father Calvin, I do want to take you through a couple of things which relate to, I think, why Starmer's so on the ropes at the moment. And it's to do with his, well, it's why Mike Graham was saying, to be honest, he's not a man. Okay. And a lot of disturbing stuff went down in the Houses of Parliament yesterday, which I'll get to in just one moment. But first, can I show you India Willoughby, who I think has become almost like the deranged face of the trans movement and the dangerous face of the trans movement in the UK. And Father Calvin, she's simply saying that all men who want to go into the women's toilets should just continue doing so as some type of protest. Watch this.
Carry on using the facilities that you always have been. This is so important. It's really important that we do not accept this and we do not conform. It's in breach of European human rights, and this case will go to the European Court of Human Rights. So carry on. If you are challenged or even stopped, contact the Good Law Project and they will record the incident. Next, just take care of yourself. Obviously, this is it's very scary and it's very stressful. But surround yourself with friends and just take care. Yeah. Okay. Bye.
So, Father Calvin, that man India Willoughby is now encouraging other men to enter female toilets. That's how sick this has now become.
Yeah, but I actually feel sorry for him because you can see clearly his distress there because he's convinced himself that he's a woman, right? This chap Jonathan calls himself India. He's convinced that he's a woman. I've seen him argue that he's a biological woman because I'm
Yes, he
biological.
says he's assist woman now. Assist woman.
But it's just, that's insane, right? That's clearly mental illness. He needs serious help. And he's been helped in the wrong way. People have affirmed him non-stop. He's on Loose Women and all kinds of stuff. Like, you're not a woman. Why are you on Loose Women? And so he's got used to he's entitled, right? He's got used to having his own way and going into women's toilets, women's changing rooms, and he shouldn't be. He's a bloke. It's illegal. It's wrong. And the Supreme Court has backed that up, thankfully. And now he's struggling to cope because for so long people have affirmed his mental illness and said, yeah, of course you're a woman, Jonathan. Let's call you India. Like, no, that is a bloke. Let's stop it now. Even in our woke England, we've come to the conclusion that a man is a man and a woman is a woman. A woman is an adult human female. A man is an adult human male. We've known this since the beginning of time. Let's not lie to ourselves anymore.
But there are still people totally humiliating themselves over this, Father Calvin. And one of them was Nadia Whitome, the hard left Labour MP. I'm going to show you J.K. Rowling's incredible response to her. But first, look at what went down in the chamber.
Research shows that half of trans people already fear using public toilets. So I am deeply, deeply concerned about the impact of comments by the Minister and the Prime Minister's spokesperson that trans people should use a toilet that many of them would not feel comfortable or safe in. So I ask, how would trans people's exclusion from toilets they have long used be a proportionate means of achieving a legitimate aim, as the Supreme Court judges and Equality Act dictates? And would the Minister like to clarify that there is nothing in law, in fact, which requires trans women to use men's toilets, or trans men to use women's toilets, or non-binary people to use one corresponding with the sex they were assigned at birth?
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Supreme Court's judgment was clear on biological sex. But I do understand and recognise the need to ensure that there is provision, including toilet facilities and other provision in place for everyone within our society. That's why many businesses, many service providers also provide unisex provision, why many service providers will also put in place enclosed bathrooms that do not require people to make that decision to ensure that their dignity and privacy is respected. That is important for all people in our country, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Now, Bridget Phillipson is a complete chancer too, Father Calvin Robinson, because there's literally footage of her saying that men should be allowed to use women's toilets. And J.K. Rowling was watching that exchange, the Harry Potter author, and responded, "You're happy to remove single-sex changing rooms from nurses, take the right to choose same-sex intimate care from women who need them, to take female-only services from female survivors of rape and domestic abuse, and remove all safeguarding for girls. Utterly despicable." Now, I also thought it was very despicable the way that Bridget Phillipson responded to Lee Anderson yesterday. So let me set this up. Lee Anderson posted, "Shocking response. Today in the chamber, it was confirmed that a woman is a woman. This madness continues every day. I am here. I asked the minister if a woman could have a penis. Her non-answer was shocking. Only Reform UK will end this madness." And what Lee Anderson didn't put in that tweet or in that post on X is what Bridget Phillipson decided to do was actually attack James McMurdoch, one of 4 Reform UK MPs, for a previous conviction he had when he was a teenager. So, Father Calvin, let's watch this together and I'll get you to respond off the back.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. A man is a man and a woman is a woman. And anybody watching this at home today will think that the lunatics have taken over the asylum, which they quite clearly have. Now, I don't need a Supreme Court judgment or ruling to tell me that a bloke shouldn't be in a women's changing room. So I want to ask the Secretary of State a very simple question for more clarity. Can a woman have a penis?
I tell you what, blokes shouldn't beat up women. Maybe he should have a word with his colleague.
Now, Father Calvin, I thought that was a disgusting response, actually, for a couple of reasons. And I know the James McMurdoch question divides people. I'm someone that thinks if you've done something when you're 19 years old, you've served 21 months. I mean, he was convicted, by the way, for physically assaulting his girlfriend. So it's totally inexcusable. But in the 2 decades since then, he's turned his life around. He's never once been in trouble with the police. He has a new wife. He has a family. But for me, it's more the fact that Bridget Phillipson was not prepared to answer the question. She's talking about an incident of a woman being beaten up, but actually it's her policies and it's her lack of clarity which continue to put women at serious threat from men.
She's actually weaponizing that incident of abuse, and that's disgusting behavior to her. And she's using it to deflect from a serious question. Can a woman have a penis? Technically, yes, a birth defect, but do women have penises? No, women don't have penises, generally speaking. And everyone knows this truth. And Labour are skirting around it because of this Supreme Court justice ruling, that they want to be seen to be understanding what the truth is without undermining what they've said for the last 10 years, which is that woman is whoever feels like a woman. It's absurd. Nadia's reaction was horrible. Like, does she genuinely believe that, or is she just being disingenuous? When she says that, so if less than 1% of the British population suffers with this mental illness that makes them think they are transgender or transsexual, if less than 1% of the population suffers with that, should the rest of the population be put at risk in order to make them feel comfortable? Like when she says that they'll feel, half of them, so half of 1%, so 0.5% of the population feel uncomfortable going into their bathrooms, into their toilets. What is she suggesting? In order to make the men who think they are women, half of those men that think they are women, feel comfortable, women should allow men into their changing rooms and their bathrooms. They lose. It's absurd. It's just insane. I can't believe that she genuinely believes that. So what is she trying to do other than virtue signal or try and show how progressive she is? She's putting women at risk.
Breaking right now, the increasingly hard left LBC, or as I call it, the Labour Broadcasting Company, has had a collective meltdown over the success of Robert Jenrick's campaign to release migrant crime data. So, yep, James O'Brien and Ian Dale, two terrible men, would rather a cover-up. That has prompted a massive bust-up with GB News host Matt Goodwin, with threats being thrown both ways. I'll get into all of that shortly, but first, very quickly, here was the Tory future leader, Jenrick, declaring victory. Let's watch this, Father Galvin Robinson.
So some good news just in. Almost exactly a year since I tabled an amendment to force the publication of data on crime by nationality. It looks like it's finally going to happen. The cover-up is coming to an end. We'll finally see the hard reality that mass migration is fueling crime across our country. Frankly, the public deserved to know this long ago.
So that prompted James O'Brien's first meltdown. Watch.
I don't know what else this is designed to do but to feed hatred. And I mean, you can tell from my voice, I really want to be wrong. Why is the Labour government determined to publish far more information about the nationalities of criminals than ever before? And you can come at this from whatever angle you want. You can, and I honestly don't think you will, because I can't see that you could. Explain to me why this isn't as unpleasant as it appears. And what are we supposed to do with the information? So if we discover that Poles commit more crimes than, I don't know, Spaniards, are we supposed to treat Poles and Spaniards differently? What am I supposed to do with this information? It's not ethnicity, it's nationality. So, I mean, are they going to publish the fact that the massive, massive, massive majority of crimes committed in this country are committed by non-foreigners? Just in terms of simple statistics, that's not an opinion, it's counting. Are we going to start having conversations about the white middle class and the white working class and their peculiar proclivity for certain kinds of crimes? What else is the reasoning behind it?
I mean, the guy's a psychopath because we know who commits violent crimes in this country. And of course, it's all about by proportion of the population. We are still a predominantly white country, for now at least. Matt Goodwin, in response, posted on X, "Man who spent years tracing everything he doesn't like to misinformation and disinformation is now upset the state is releasing information on a subject he'd rather we ignore." And James O'Brien hadn't finished there. Watch.
I'm simultaneously chilled to the core by it, but also convinced that I must be missing something. Politicians return to Parliament today after the Easter recess. The announcement is expected to be made today. The question I want you to answer is this: why are they doing it? Why do you think they are doing it? Okay? Because for the life of me, I cannot see what the benefit will be. To discover that Albanians, Romanians and Poles, as is already widely accepted, are going to be among the worst offenders in this country helps us do what? Isabel and a couple of you are being very glass half full on this one and suggesting that it will actually show what a small percentage of crime is committed by immigrants. Well, yes, that's also true, but it doesn't explain why you need the league table. They could just tell us repeatedly about the proportion or the percentage of crime that is committed by British citizens and set it up against the percentage of crime that is committed by non-British citizens. You bring poverty into the equation and it's likely that there's going to be a higher incidence of crime among the poorest parts of the population.
Okay, so maybe with James O'Brien, you can at least understand that he is deliberately trying to mislead. And he has been deliberately trying to mislead you, and you know that for years. And that's why you've all woken up and very few sane people watch him anymore. But what's most bizarre, and why I think this is part of something bigger going on at left-wing LBC, is that the station's apparently Conservative host Ian Dale also advocated for a cover-up.
All in favour of transparency, but I'm struggling to think of a positive reason, a positive benefit that will come from the publication of these figures. Because, I mean, if we find that a particular nationality is by far and away at the top of the figures, isn't that just going to fan the flames of sort of an anti-whatever nationality that is? So I'm trying to work out why they're doing this, because I do think it's the sort of thing that if the Conservatives had announced they were doing this, say Suella Braverman or Priti Patel when they were Home Secretary, say they had announced this, I'm as sure as I can be that Labour would have been up in arms and said, this is a disgrace, blah, blah, blah. So maybe you can tell me whether you think this is a good idea. As I say, normally I would argue that we should be totally transparent on everything within government, but surely there might be some negative consequences to this.
The guy's a fool. He's not a Conservative at all. He's all about information control. You're not about transparency if you want something like that to be covered up. Now, that exchange prompted a massive bust-up between Ian Dale and Matt Goodwin, with the LBC host appearing to threaten his GB News rival. So let me take you through a part of the exchange. Ian Dale wrote, "Don't dare to lecture me on what I am supposed to be, or I'll start on you. And that wouldn't end well for you. Your constant efforts to stir up division make me sick." Bit of a threat there. And Matt Goodwin replied, "You are the embodiment of why the Tories got smoked. You are more interested in being nice and protecting foreign criminals than doing what Conservatives are supposed to do, protect their own people and country." So Father Calvin Robinson, I mean, wow, that threat from Ian Dale to Matt Goodwin is quite something. I want to start with that. Don't lecture me or I'll start on you, and that wouldn't end well for you. God, these people on the left, and I'm going to just start calling Ian Dale on the left because he is, they're just foul, aren't they?
Yeah, it's aggressive, it's arrogance, but it's also, again, deflection, because he can't handle the point, so he has to handle the person instead. It's a classic technique of the left, isn't it? For Ian Dale to sit there and say, I believe in transparency, but not on this. Well, why? What is it you're trying to hide, Ian Dale? What is the problem with transparency on this particular topic? What will it show that you don't want to be shown? It's the same for James O'Brien. He keeps asking the question, why? Well, let's flip it back around. Why not? Why would you not want us to know the nationality of the criminals in this country? Perhaps because then we could do something about it. If there's a key demographic, say, for example, Pakistani Muslim men who seem to be grooming and raping young British girls, perhaps we need to have fewer Pakistani Muslim men coming into the country. Perhaps we need to deport them. You know, these are questions we could be having if we had the data out there. Having information is not a bad thing. And people who say, like James O'Brien, who say it will breed hate. Why will it breed hate? You know, people have often said this. You can't have the statistics on racial demographics of crimes because it will breed racism. Why would it breed racism? What is it you're trying to suggest there? You know, I'll put the question back to the people saying this.
I know, it's quite extraordinary to me. It really is. What do you think has happened to LBC as a station, Father Calvin? Because it now seems very clear to me that people like Nick Ferrari and Ian Dale are now captured because they argue opposite everything they used to claim to believe.
Yeah, well, I suppose they've seen what happens to Katie Hopkins and Nigel Farage and anyone that has a right of centre opinion on that station. You get canned and just disregarded. They've had to fit in with what's become a massively left-wing and quite extreme in some circumstances organisation. So they've had to adapt. And I suppose the Overton window at LBC has shifted so far left that Nick and Ian, they may still think they're conservative, even because everyone around them is so rabidly hard left. To them, they may be conservative, but of course, the rest of us, all things relative, right? They're not.
Yeah, Ian Dale is not a conservative. I'm sorry, he's not. He's also a really nasty piece of work, Father Calvin, to be completely honest. I mean, I remember those early days of GB News when I believe he should have been desperate for plurality in the British media. And he was just vile and nasty and bitter and constantly posting really horrible things. And it's like, yeah, we know we're effing up on the technology, right? Like, everyone's very aware of that. But I just thought it was a very odd approach for a man who claimed to be on the right in the mainstream media. And it made me realize, actually, he's just like an Adam Bolton. He's happy to be on the right as long as it's only him. And he controls the information flow. What he didn't want was a genuine change to the broadcasting ecosystem where there would be lots of opinions coming in. That's what I love about the independent media now, Father Calvin. And actually, we heard, didn't we, earlier this week, that they think there's about to be a hit piece. I think the Daily Telegraph are working on it. No one's approached me about it, by the way, but we know someone else who has been approached. And this hit piece is going to be on former GB News presenters. Father Calvin, I wonder who they're talking about. I imagine it's something to do with the two of us, who have moved to YouTube and are influencing right-wing politics outside of the mainstream. And I thought, yep, that's what's coming next, isn't it? That is what's coming next. The mainstream right-wing media are now going to team up to try and shut down independence.
100%. So Ian Dale, Adam Bolton, they're gatekeepers. The reason Ian was so nasty about GB News in those early days is because he felt threatened. These people are gatekeepers for what they see as conservatism, and the Telegraph is no different. I think of one good writer there still at the moment. The rest of it has shifted left, and of course they are threatened by independent media, by myself and you and our friends who are trying to do everything we can to be transparent, open, honest, independent, outside of the pressure of the establishment. And of course, these mainstream media companies are under the pressure. So we can sit there and laugh at them for taking the bungs of cash, but it comes with a price, doesn't it? It comes with a cost. And that cost is their integrity. They no longer have it. And this is a reason that all of the mainstream media outlets all appear to be left-wing, or they all appear to be singing from the same hymn sheet, because they are. They get in their marching orders from whether it's the regulatory body or the government. It doesn't matter. And so they have no journalistic integrity anymore. They have no outside look of how to hold the powers that be to account, of speaking truth to power. It's all about money. It's all about influence. And it's all about being under the arm of the establishment of the time, unfortunately. So of course they're going to do everything they can to take down people like you, people like me, and Lawrence and Mark Stein, and so to see this Telegraph.
Because I was thinking about it, there's no one else they can be talking about, Father Coven. I was
Not at
really
all.
working it through in my head because I thought the only former GB News presenters who have gone independent, well, I guess you could say Mark Dolan, he's another one, but I wouldn't argue that he's really doing politics. So it is us. By the way, speaking of the independent media, please do sign up to my Substack, www.outspoken.live. You can do so completely free, but what's so important about Substack is it's not controlled by the big tech in the same way. Allows us to have a direct relationship because, as we're just discussing, there is so much chance that we will end up being cancelled in some way, or that I may have to follow Father Calvin to America eventually. Calvin, that is another possibility that we're looking at. Like, is it going to have to be like the pirate radio days where the only way that we can broadcast honestly about what's going on in the UK without having to deal with the type of lawfare and censorship that's being used against us is to broadcast from outside of the United Kingdom? But even then, we're not necessarily protected given the way that the UK government is trying to crack down on big tech. So I know all of this is something that sounds pretty technical and everything, but it matters, doesn't it? It really matters.
Of course it matters. It's about our society. It's about civilization itself, right? If we don't have a free press, a free independent media, then we don't have free speech. If we don't have free speech, we don't have democracy. If we don't have democracy, we don't have freedom. So all of it really is about a way of life. It's far more important than we make out quite often.
Indeed, very true. Father Calvin Robinson, do stand by though, because in just 1 minute, 2 major humiliations for the British Bashing Corporation, and you're not going to want to miss these. Firstly, the Tate brothers. I know they divide opinion, but you're going to want to watch the way that Tristan Tate took down a BBC reporter by using Hugh Edwards. Let me just leave it at that for now. Then, total humiliation for Gary Lineker over pro-Hamas BBC propaganda. I'm going to show you more from this extraordinary interview with Amal Rajan, where it just proved this guy Lineker, he knows nothing about impartiality or journalism. So lots to come. Don't go anywhere. We're back in just 1 minute. But first, you know I never recommend anything unless I truly believe in it. And I've got something game-changing for you today. Have you ever stopped to think about how crucial comfort is down there? Well, let me tell you, today's Outspoken is proudly sponsored by Sheath Underwear, the revolutionary brand shaking up men's comfort across the globe. And here's what makes Sheath even better. It was founded by a US Army veteran, Robert Patton, while he was serving in Iraq back in 2007. So that's right, this isn't just any underwear brand. It was designed for the toughest conditions imaginable. Patton was battling relentless heat and discomfort in full combat gear, and he thought there has to be a better way. So he created it. And let's be honest, traditional underwear just doesn't cut it anymore. Sheath's innovative dual pouch design ensures your comfort all day long, keeping things separate, cool, and fresh. Imagine your essentials being comfortably cradled away from the unwanted friction and heat. Trust me, it's genuinely transformative. I've personally tested these at the gym, on long days at work, and just relaxing at home. And I'm telling you, once you've experienced Sheath, there's simply no going back. They're stylish, they're supportive, and they deliver unmatched comfort. It's like upgrading from economy to first class, but for your underwear. And check this out right now. I am offering you an exclusive 20% discount at sheath.com. Yes, that's 20% off your entire order. You just have to remember to use my special promo code Outspoken, the word Outspoken, when you check out. So what are you waiting for? Sheath is the perfect present for your husband, your boyfriend, your son, your brother, or your hard-to-buy best mates. And guess what, ladies? When you're on the website too, you will see there are brilliant female versions available too. Sheath is also the first official underwear of the UFC. So just click on the link below, enter Outspoken at checkout, or go to sheath.com, and you can thank me later when you're feeling comfortable, confident, and ready to tackle anything your day throws at you. Sheath underwear, redefining comfort one pair at a time. But now, back to the show. Breaking right now, the British Bashing Corporation has been humiliated twice on one day. First, by Gary Lineker over its pro-Hamas propaganda, which I'm going to come to very shortly. But let's kick off with the Tate brothers, two very controversial figures, Tristan and Andrew, who I'm pretty sure whatever you think of their rhetoric, you would agree they have been targeted by the UK state broadcaster for years. And there is a real irony to that, given that the Beeb has been the biggest protector of paedophiles in the history of Britain. From Jimmy Savile to Hugh Edwards. A point that Tristan Tate made brilliantly in this takedown with a hapless BBC reporter. Let's watch this together, Father Calvin Robinson, and I'll get your reaction off the back.
Ah! The Russian criminal. Hello, friend.
Russia or China?
Russia or China, yeah, maybe. I'll go Russia when he comes with me.
How do you respond to allegations that you sexually assaulted your girlfriend in the Beverly Hills hotel? How do you respond to that?
Are you still with the BBC, Mircea?
Yes, I am.
I have a question for you about this man. He's one of your colleagues. He was caught sending child porn to children. Do you know him? Did you work with this man?
Why are you deflecting?
Did you work
How
with
do you
this man?
respond, Andrew?
No, it's very
How
important
do you
because
respond to
I'm actually the journalist.
allegations?
I'm the journalist here because I get more views than the BBC. This
How do you
man was a
respond to
pedophile. He
allegations
worked for the
that
BBC.
you
Was
sexually
he a colleague
assaulted
of
your
yours?
ex-girlfriend?
Was this guy a colleague of yours, Mircea? Because he worked
I'm
for the
asking
BBC.
your brother a question.
He was sending this image to children who are
That's
under
deflecting,
14.
Tristan.
He got 0 jail time.
That's
I think you need to
deflecting.
look at your own organisation, my friend.
And Lawrence Fox posted in response to that, well said, Tristan and Andrew, the BBC is a finishing school for paedophiles. The taxpayer is still footing the bill for a man caught with the most depraved images of children possible. Your credibility is gone. Get in the bin. And Father Calvin Robinson, I genuinely think Tristan Tate had such an amazing point in this case. The BBC is obsessed with the Tate brothers to almost a deranged degree. Now, that's not to say that there aren't certain questions maybe about some of the Tate brothers' language or however you want to talk about it, but the BBC is obsessed. They want to destroy these two men. They want to present them as monsters. And look, they're not monsters, okay? They're simply not. Now, it's also not intellectual debate. I'm prepared to have that. I know you have lots of concerns about the Tate brothers, and I understand that, right? I understand that. Megyn Kelly has lots of concerns about the Tate brothers. Ron DeSantis does. But what the BBC are doing here is that appetite for destruction. And there is a huge irony, Father Calvin, when they had in their midst for decades two of the United Kingdom's most famous paedophiles. First, Jimmy Savile, probably the worst of all time. At that point, Father Calvin, there was literally a paedophile ring operating within the BBC. Jill Dando, the former Crime Watch host who was shot to death on her doorstep, was trying to uncover it before she was killed. Have we ever got to the bottom of that? I would argue no. Then they allowed a paedophile to present the news of the late Queen Elizabeth II's death. And they don't turn and look at themselves. They're just obsessed with the Tates.
It's dark. The BBC is an institutionally paedophilic organisation and should be shut down. Forget defund the BBC; they need to be closed down entirely. And the fact that Jimmy Savile was only discovered after his death, when everyone knew, all the people at the BBC knew what he was up to, but it only came out after he died, just shows how despicable they all are and how immoral they all are. And it's the same with Hugh Edwards. They were all backing him, and in the end, what happened? He got a slap on the wrist for being a child predator. It's absolutely, it's gross what happens at the BBC. And on the other hand, they believe in this. It's almost like a trial by media. So people they don't like, they want to cancel and silence. The Tate brothers are victims of this from the BBC and other mainstream media outlets. And Tristan's absolutely right to point out that, in fact, and that was interesting as well, they wouldn't let him speak. They ask him all these questions, then he has something to say, and they're talking over him. But he's absolutely right to point out that, how can you stand there and lecture me on morality when you guys are covering for your BBC paedophile colleagues? I mean, it's a fair point. Why should he speak to them?
So much depravity in regards to paedophilia has taken place at the BBC, Father Calvin. And I know we've discussed this before, but I will just repeat, if this were a private company, it would have been closed down decades ago. And then we're meant to buy into this psyop that we should be proud of the BBC as Brits. It's like, I'm ashamed. I'm completely ashamed of the BBC as an organisation that allowed Jimmy Savile to run rampant alongside a whole other paedophile ring, that covered up for his crimes, that celebrated him after his death, and then allowed the whole thing to repeat again with Hugh Edwards. And I'm sorry, I know what the BBC does, Calvin. It comes after innocent people on the right, like me. At this point, the Tates are completely innocent. They have been found guilty of no crime. Hugh Edwards has. They come after Lawrence Fox. They come after Russell Brand. You know, it's so obvious what their playbook is.
It is, and it's sad that people don't always see through it, because the BBC had a good reputation for so long. We've always talked about it as the soft power of Great Britain. And so there's an elderly generation that still look to the BBC for their source of news. And when they're being fed that this person's a bad person, this person's a bad person, when they are themselves harboring the bad people, it's dangerous to our society. It's very sad. But of course, there's nothing that can be done because nobody wants to challenge the behemoth that is the BBC. And I'll put it to you that it's probably because the establishment has so much control over what goes on at the BBC and is probably complicit in a lot of the activities that goes on at the BBC, which is why it won't be defunded.
No, it won't be defunded because the government needs it. It's the propaganda arm for whatever the government of the day is. And that's why they're so terrified of the men on screen. That's why they're so terrified of Elon Musk. It's why they're so terrified of Andrew Tate. It's why they're so terrified of Lawrence Fox. And it's why they're so terrified of Tucker Carlson. But it wasn't the only BBC humiliation over the past 24 hours, Father Calvin, because Gary Lineker decided to sit down with, wait for it, the BBC for his BBC exit interview. So he was hardly going to be asked any hard questions. Yet he still managed to, I would say, disgrace himself and disgrace the BBC with his complete lack of understanding about impartiality, which is particularly important over the conflict in Israel and Palestine, where I would argue, and I would say anyone sane would agree with me, that the BBC has a very pro-Palestine, anti-Israel editorial position. So before we get into what went down specifically with that documentary, which featured the son of a Hamas leader, here was the embarrassing way where Gary Lineker proved to the world that he doesn't really have any brain power. Watch.
You could be partial. I know where I stand on this. I'm sorry. It's more important than what the BBC, what's going on there is, you know, the mass murder of thousands of children is probably something that we should have a little opinion on.
But the BBC as a whole needs to be impartial about it.
Why? It needs to be factual.
It needs to be impartial about a conflict, doesn't it? And it's hard.
Does it have to be? It wasn't impartial about Ukraine and Russia.
And you might say that the...
Why does it have to be impartial about... I understand if it's partial about our government and things in this country and everything like that, but something that's going on that far away, why does it...
Because the Israeli position is that what is happening in Gaza, and by the way, I'm not here as an advocate of the Israeli government, but the Israeli position is that what is happening in Gaza is a response to the slaughter and capture of innocent Israelis on October the 7th. And
which was awful, which was truly awful.
And that full context needs to be there when discussing what's going on.
But that's not the full context, is it? Because the full context starts way before October the 7th, doesn't it?
It sounds like you think the BBC is in a complete mess on impartiality.
No, I don't think the BBC is in a mess. I think the BBC has it. It's very difficult for the BBC. I think the BBC generally does a really good job of it, but it's not always easy. I think facts are the most important thing that they, you know, it's like that old thing, isn't it? If it's raining outside, you don't need someone's opinion to say it's not raining. What you want to see is actually what is the weather outside. So I understand why it's so difficult for the BBC, and it really is. And I feel for the people at the top because, you know, the amount of lobbying that will be going on and from people with, you know, that aren't very impartial must be immense.
I mean, he's the one who isn't very impartial, Father Calvin Robinson. Effectively what he's saying, he wants a BBC for the 40% of leftists in this country.
I actually agree with him. I think he was honest. I think he should be able to say, look, this is where I stand. I'm pro-Hamas and anti-Israel, rather than having to pretend that he's got some kind of impartiality. And he's also right in that the BBC wasn't impartial in terms of Russia and the Ukraine, and that broke its impartiality, which backs him as well as us up, actually, in that the BBC isn't as impartial as it claims to be. So stop pretending, I think. Just let people be honest with their views.
Totally. But then you've got to be a privately funded organisation.
Yes, absolutely.
Which obviously we both agree. We would have no problem. I mean, I actually have no problem with Gary Lineker going on his Hard Left podcast. If people want to listen to that, that's fine. What I found very shocking, though, Father Calvin, is that he had no understanding about why the controversial BBC documentary, which was pulled, was such a shocking, shoddy piece of journalism. Now, to sum it up very briefly for folk who may not have remembered this controversy, the BBC presented the conflict in Gaza from the point of view of a 9-year-old child without revealing that said 9-year-old child was the son of Hamas leaders. I mean, this really is an extraordinary exchange. Watch.
What you know now, which is that the narrator of that documentary
as a child,
is a child whose father is a Hamas official, and that wasn't disclosed to the public, which amounts to a serious flaw in the view of the BBC. Would you still sign that letter?
Yes. 13-year-old child narrating. It's not been written by. It's been written by the people who produced the show.
But the BBC failed to do sufficient due diligence.
I don't believe they. I think they just capitulated to lobbying that they get a lot of lobbying.
And audiences didn't know something quite fundamental about the child, which is that he was the son of a Hamas official. Isn't that a problem?
I don't think so, no.
And so you would put the programme back on iPlayer now?
100%. I think you let people make their own minds up. We're adults. We're allowed to see things like that. I mean, it's incredibly moving.
But the argument against it is that if you are addressing an issue like Gaza, doing it through the eyes of a child almost immediately puts you on the side of Palestinians who are suffering.
Right. Well,
he doesn't care because it's propaganda.
That's his point.
Yeah, exactly. That's what he wants, propaganda, doesn't he? Father Calvin.
When he answered a question with, that was funny.
I mean, what he is effectively saying is he's pro-propaganda. I found it extraordinary.
He's not just pro-Palestine or pro-Gaza. He seems to be pro-Hamas at this point, actually.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is that surely you should, at the very least, if you care about journalism and if you care about honesty, at the very least, you should want a disclosure to be made available to viewers. That's what would be honest. But he didn't. And a huge pushback on this from Stephen Pollard, who wrote on X, I've listened to Amol Rajan's full interview with Gary Lineker, in which he is at it again, this time explaining away October 7th by contextualizing it. It's a shame Rajan didn't ask Lineker about his habit of reposting anti-Semites and their anti-Semitic statements and his penchant for Jew-splaining anti-Semitism and history to the likes of Simon Sharma. But the interview was nonetheless so revealing in that context. It's the only time, as far as I'm aware, that Lineker, who has 8.7 million followers, which is why it matters what he says, has actually said anything remotely condemnatory about what happened on October 7th. But tellingly, he can't bring himself to do just that. He immediately goes for the usual tactic of his allies and jumps on why October the 7th must be placed in its full context. And Andrew Gold added, it's so sad. Gary Lineker is gone, totally devoid of empathy and understanding. Roger Waters' level of anti-Semitism, wild fringe theories about Jewish lobbies in charge of the BBC, despite the fact the objective reports show the BBC has a huge anti-Israel bias. A few years ago, this level of overt racism would be sackable, but we're in choppy waters. And from Graham Linehan, not once did he stand up for women's sport. He's a coward. And I'm glad I had the chance to tell him so. And I thought actually that was such a good point from Graham Linehan too. I mean, This is a guy who picks and chooses, doesn't he, what his social justice issues are, Father Calvin, because he didn't stick up for women once.
Yeah, I just don't think he's that clever. I don't,
No, he's not.
You know, I don't think he's
not
capable of it. I think Andrew Gold went a bit far there. It's not a racism issue. It's like you can be pro-Israel or anti-Israel. You can be pro-Palestine or Gaza and pro-Palestine or Gaza. Like, to undermine it and say it's all racism as well. Like, Gary Lineker has clearly drunk the Kool-Aid on the Hamas propaganda, but that doesn't make him a racist.
Yeah.
It makes him pretty stupid.
Totally. And I also, I am actually with you, by the way, on the fact that we shouldn't just shut down the Israel-Hamas debate by immediately calling anything anti-Semitic, because I remember the days when people like Nigel Farage and I were being criticised by the pro-Jewish lobby for using the word globalism, which is just clearly absolutely ridiculous, and criticising Grant Shapps, who we didn't even know was Jewish. So yes, we do have to be careful, but I think when it comes to Gary Lineker, though, he's so far down that rabbit hole, and the interview sort of brilliantly exposed it. Father Calvin Robinson, thank you so much. Absolutely brilliant to have you. Oh, and congratulations, by the way. You were our greatest Britain on Monday.
Thank you. Thank you to the viewers and everyone who voted. God bless you all. I appreciate that. It's very kind.
Yes, as chosen by the Outspoken audience. And we're going to get to our greatest Britain and Union Jackass in just one moment. First, though, a few comments from you about Starmer and Southport and all of that. Steve writes, private life of political leaders is important. If you don't treat your spouse with respect, how can we expect them to respect the people and interests of the country? That's my point. Pom said, this is in regards to Southport and his lies over Southport, a decent PM would have announced a day of mourning and then would have gone to church to pray for the girls who were so brutally killed. Of course, I'm pretty sure Starmer's an atheist, isn't he? No surprise there. Jasmine Henderson, oh, this is on that shocking footage of the crime in Edgware Road, said, I mean, an ex-born and bred Londoner. I would never go back there. And on a similar note, Helen Shepherd said, I used to go to London in the early 70s and it was a lovely place. I wouldn't go there now on my own at all. And it was so sad, actually. I was speaking to one of my Outspoken founding members. And you can sign up, by the way, www.outspoken.live. Founding members get a personal one-on-one video call with me. And I was speaking to one of my founding members who's visiting from New Mexico for the first time to the UK next week. Tish, sure she wouldn't mind me saying. And it was so sad. I had to warn Tish. I had to say, you cannot get your mobile phone out when you're in London. Please promise me you won't do it, because if you do so in public, it's very, very likely that you'll be mugged. And I just thought, what a terrible thing that I have to say to an American who's looking forward to visiting the United Kingdom for the first time, but that is how far we have fallen. Okay, really looking forward to this GBUJ today. Your nominees, Gary Lineker. We know why, we just discussed it. James O'Brien, we know why, we discussed it earlier in the show. And Nadia Whittome, we also know why, because all three of them have been discussed on the show today. In third place, with 10% of the vote, it's Nadia Whittome for her trans rhetoric. With 40% of the vote, but this was close, the runner-up, Gary Lineker, for his BBC bias arrogance. But today's Union Jackass, with 49% of the vote, James O'Brien, because he doesn't believe, he doesn't think there's any reason that we should know the ethnicity of people committing crimes by migrants in this country. And today's Greatest Britain, a really good nominee, Rosie Duffield, put forward by Fat Faye for standing up to Starmer. And did you see that? So look at the picture there. Look at her face. This is what happened today at PMQs at the exact moment that Starmer refused to apologise to Rosie Duffield when asked to do so by the leader of the opposition, Kemi Badenoch. And she posted that picture herself, Rosie Duffield, on X, and she said, oh dear, after almost 8 years, you do forget the cameras sometimes. But I thought it was great. It was a genuine reaction. Now, we've got a very special Uncancelled After Show today. I do hope you sign up on Substack, www.outspoken.live, because we have 2 YouTube sensations joining me on Outspoken for the first time. So excited about this. George, the Giant Slayer. He's all about pop culture and everything from across the Atlantic. And the British war hero, Trevor Coult MC. So please come and join us at Substack for those conversations. www.outspoken.live. At this stage, we're going to move off YouTube and Rumble, continue the Uncancelled After Show on Substack. Oh, there's Trevor Coult, the moment he received his MC from the late Queen Elizabeth II. What an amazing moment. Anyway, we're back live tomorrow, midday Eastern Time, 9 a.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. UK time. Hit subscribe if you're watching on YouTube or Rumble. And most importantly, I promise to keep fighting for you.